Okay, so good morning to you all. My name is Alberto de Orleans Bragança. I'm a partner here at the Veirano law firm. I'm very glad that we can have you all here in order to discuss the new situation of the sanitary situation in Brazil as a whole. I'm very happy that we are joined here by very learned speakers about the sector, and also to have the experience of Juan Carlos, who is from Spain, that's going to provide us with a view from Spain and Europe as a whole on the sector. I don't have to say much about the importance of this seminar here, because I mean we are talking about something that we have that has been discussed a lot in the press, in the Brazilian press, and very likely a lot of the investors are looking at. But in any event, I just wanted to make some remarks about the importance of it. I mean, as you know, we just had a new law passed in Brazil, which was published in July 15th, in which the new regime for the sanitary sector has been, say, formally reviewed in Brazil, with a set of rules that we hope is going to bring a lot of modernization to the sector as a whole, and as such very likely stimulate investments that are enormously required. As you probably know, we have a huge social debt in that sector. I mean, effectively in Brazil, we have like 83%, only 83% of the Brazilian population attended by water supply, and less than 54% of people attended by water collection, and even less than that attended by sewage treatment. It means that in percentage-wise may not mean as much, but I mean, if you talk about number of people, we're talking about 35 million people that are not attended by water supply, plus than 100 million people that are not attended by the sewage treatment and sewage collection. So there is a huge amount of work that has been conducted here. And when at the new law, there has been some important targets set by the government, which is universalization of the attendance by those water supply and sewage treatment by 2033, which is going to require like to between 500 and 700 billion reais of investment, which is obviously a huge number. And considering the current fiscal situation that we're facing in Brazil, we are definitely going to require a lot of private investments in the sector. And the new law has come about just to effect at the right time, in order to organize and to give some clearness to the legal framework that is applied to the sector, and thus as such stimulating the private sector to invest in the area. So we are very hopeful that this is going to be effectively happen. And this seminar the idea of this seminar is effective to give some lights to those that are interested on that, and to raise the main issues of what and how we see the new legal framework and regulatory framework, and also understand that we still have a way to go, but some hurdles have been passed. And we're sure that with the evolution of the discussions and the evolution of the understanding of people of what this new law means, and also from the authorities from at the state and municipal level, we're going to be going a very long way hopefully in a very short time. So this is it. I mean, that's what I wanted to make as an introduction remarks. I want to pass the microphone to my dear partner, Daniel Engel, that is going to also add some words and also make a presentation of the very important speakers that we have with us here today. Thank you very much. Daniel, acho que você está sem o microfone.
Thank you all. I thought that I was already on. So thank you very much, Albert, for kind words I'll be very happy to introduce our participants and make an introduction. I'll expedite a little bit the introduction since I already know we are short of time. Our colleague Guilherme Albuquerque from the BNDES is trying to access the platform, so he will be with us in a couple of minutes. So Guilherme, he's an engineer and he's the head of public-private partnerships department at the BNDES. He's a well-known figure and a professional in the water and sanitation market in Brazil, and a very important public servant in that field. Now we have here also Fernando Marcato. You all see him here. He's a partner at GO Associados. He's a teacher at GV Foundation, Getúlio Vargas in Brazil. He's also a very recognized advisor and professional in the sector with extensive academic background. Fernando has just been announced as the new Secretary of Infrastructure of the state of Minas Gerais, which is one of the largest and most important states in Brazil. He has a great challenge ahead of him. So we're happy to have you here, Fernando. Thank you very much. So we also have our friend Jaci Prado Barbosa. He's an economist and he's a director at AEGEA. AEGEA is one of the largest players in the water and sanitation market in Brazil. Jaci has an extensive career working in the private sector as an advisor. He's structured dozens of water and sanitation projects in Brazil, extensive knowledge of infrastructure and sanitation in Latin America. We also have here Juan Carlos Hernández. Juan Carlos, he's a partner at Cuatro Casas in Barcelona, in Spain. He's a public law specialist, has an extensive experience in water and sanitation projects throughout Europe, and his presence, we're delighted to have him here with us. He will be our filter for ideas and queries from the foreign investor side, which is actually the main goal and audience we hope to have here. So thank you very much all for that, for your presence. Thank you very much again, Alberto, for introduction. There's a great challenge here in the water and sanitation sector in Brazil, which for Brazilians is a great challenge, which is to understand how water and sanitation services work in Brazil. The institutional framework is a complex one. So I'll try to be like make a 5-minute introduction of the main aspects of water and sanitation services in Brazil, so that the foreign audience may be better familiar with the situation before we start addressing the most relevant issues of the new law with our guests. So for you to know, as Alberto said, water and sewage services rank as last among the infrastructure sectors in Brazil. So the shortfall of investments is remarkable, and there's a large path to follow and way to go to reach universalization. We're talking about 150 to 200 billion dollars. Scale and operators. This is a very important piece of information. 94% of the market share is held by state-owned companies, and notably state companies. When we talk about state companies, these are state-owned companies owned by the states. So Brazil is organized, is divided into the federal government, state government, and municipal governments. So 94% of the market operators are state companies. And this might sound weird because municipalities are the authority responsible to render the services, according to the Brazilian Constitution. So why has, there are so many state companies operating? This is because in the 1970s, due to problems of scale, since sanitation requires scale so that the investments are feasible, the federal government ordered states. So we had by then a different constitutional framework. So the federal government ordered the states to incorporate their own companies and serve the municipalities. And the municipalities, they had to access to the services that were offered by these state companies, and they were obliged to access also the planning of these state companies. So this is why, since the 1970s, the market has been opened. There's sorry, I'll just make a correction of information. 70% is operated by the state, so there's a 24%, I would say, more or less, is operated by municipal services. Okay, this is something that was wrong here. I just noticed. So, but 94% of the market is held by the state, let's say, state-owned companies or municipal services. So private companies operate roughly 6%. Depends on how the statistics are used and which statistics you choose and pick. This is actually one of the main challenges here. We have municipal authority to create and regulate the services, which could possibly make 5,000 municipalities in Brazil choose to operate the services as they see fit and regulate the services as they see fit. So it's very fragmented. But in terms of operation, you have state companies operating most of these facilities. And private investment has to do with that. A potential fragmentation of regulation and certain difficulty to access the market due to certain hindrances that exist from a regulatory perspective for them to compete with state companies, let's say. And this background has led us to what we are here today. Of course, that there are several reasons for that. It doesn't mean that public or private companies, they're better or they're worse. But where we are today lead us to the situation that if we keep on doing what we have been doing, we will likely achieve the same results. So the lawmaker has come to the conclusion that we could make a few changes on the framework. So the idea is, what would be the potential solutions? Liberalization, which is market opening to private companies, how to incentivize scale with investments, and just let us remember that private investment and scale would require, let's say, we're talking about hundreds, possibly hundreds of billions of dollars, which means that in the current fiscal situation, we would likely not be able to do that. So how can we bring private investment? How can we make private investment benefit and, of course, be interested in gains of scale? And what is the role that regulation would play in this environment? How regulation would help us address these challenges? Okay, so that is why, of course, that the new law is more complex than that, but we have chosen these three topics: liberalization, scale, and regulation, which we think that from the foreign investor perspective would be, first thing to address and to understand. And I believe that once you were interested in the subject matter, you will be able to make a deeper investigation on that. So let's start with the liberalization. Alberto, please, the first question.
Yeah, I think the first question would go to Fernando. Fernando, if you could, I mean, based on your experience and as a professional and also as a teacher, if you could just let us know your views about the new law and what it has proposed to increase the private investment and competition in the context of the sanitation and water system, considering obviously concession and PPP.
Sure. Thank you, Alberto, and thank you, Danielle. For me, it's an honor to participate in such a prestigious event. Veirano is one of the leading law firms in the country and in Latin America as well. So I'm very pleased to be with you guys discussing such an important subject matter. So I think one key change that has been brought by the new law is the fact that state-controlled companies, as mentioned by Danielle, they no longer could operate municipalities without participating in public tender. I know this might sound weird, but since until the enaction of the new law, public state-controlled companies could render services, water and sewage services, and sign concession contracts without a public tender. And this was one of the key claims of the industry, of the private sector, that it was to prohibit this kind of arrangement. And this is what has been done by the new law. There is an exception, which is still pending a decision by the Congress. Only for our listeners to understand the way it works in the legislative system of Brazil is once you approve a law, this law goes to the President of the Republic, and the President may veto some articles of the law that he or she does not agree. And that's what the President did. He vetoed some articles. But then once he vetoed these articles, the Congress, the Parliament, can deny the veto by revoting exclusively these vetoes. And this is done by the two chambers, the lower chamber and the Senate, okay, together. So what was stated in the law was that this prohibition of having contracts without a public tender will only come into effect after 2 years from the inaction of the law, saying 2022. And the President vetoed this and mentions that with the inaction of the law, these contracts without tender are definitely prohibited. And now there is an expectation that the Congress will vote this veto, and there is a possibility that we believe is relatively high, although it's very uncertain to say, that the Congress will cancel the veto of the President. So it is likely that the 2 years waiver will remain in the law. So that's an important point that one should consider in the next weeks or so, because if the veto is kept, then the water utilities, the state-controlled water utilities, will at some point, I mean in the near future, will have to leave the municipalities they operate, and these municipalities either will take back the service and operate by themselves, or they will prepare tenders, right? So that's an important point I would like to draw your attention. A second point is that the law brings a set of mechanisms and incentives for the municipalities and the states to form blocks, what we call municipality blocks. What are these blocks? It's like putting a bunch of municipalities together, and they will then prepare a tender, and they will have one operator operating the set of municipalities. The reason for that is that is for the sector to gain more scale, and also to have a cross-subsidy between municipalities who are more profitable and those who are not so much profitable. So the law brings a set of mechanisms and incentives to create this kind of blocks and this kind of arrangements and what we call federal arrangements in order for the projects to be bigger, to be more attractive to the private initiatives. And I can mention two projects. One is already, the tender documents are already published. It's a tender for the concession of water and sewage services in the metropolitan region of Maceió in the state of Alagoas. Alagoas is a small state in the northeast of Brazil, and we are talking about 1 million people concession if you take Maceió and the rest of the municipalities in the metropolitan region. So that's one example of putting municipalities together to do a public tender. And the second one is the process of a concession in Rio de Janeiro. This process is under public hearing. The tender has not been published yet, but it involves the concession of water and sewage in 4 lots in the state of Rio. So basically taking the whole state of Rio de Janeiro. And one interesting solution is that each lot has a part of the municipality of Rio de Janeiro. So they have split the municipality into 4. So the company who wins the first lot, let's say, will operate just a part of the municipality of Rio, but also other municipalities in the state of Rio de Janeiro. So these are some examples of what is going on. This project of Rio has a large capex, a very large capex, and one could expect about 30 billion reais of capex for this project. So it's a very large project. And I think with the new law, new opportunities for private investors will come and will make a more, let's say, increase the participation of private companies in the sector.
Thank you very much. Daniel?
Thank you, Fernando. And now we are able to welcome Guilherme Albuquerque. Guilherme, we already made the introductions of your bio and everything. So I would like to say welcome. I believe that your microphone and everything is working.
I think I'm having something to connect. Is it okay?
Yeah, now it seems to work. I'll make a question to you. So let's see if we can listen to you well. So we're still discussing liberalization, okay? So Guilherme, as head of the PPP department at the BNDES, could you tell us what scenarios the bank is working with as regards private investment in new concessions and PPPs, considering the bank's role as a major player in project modeling and structuring?
Just I listen to me, right? Okay. Yes. Is it okay? Daniel is able to listen.
Yeah. It's a bit difficult. It seems it's just cutting.
Okay. Yeah.
So, yeah, it seems that the connection is not working very well.
You hear me? Good. If you are hear me, I can tell. I answer your question. Main role as the modeling. At least.
I think that, Guilherme, let's just follow. We will switch to the next question and see if we can. Maybe you could leave the room and come back.
And then come back.
Probably see if your connection gets better. Yeah, please. So I'll move to the next question to Jacy. Jacy, still talking about liberalization. One of the main issues raised against the new law is that private investors will not be interested in operating sanitation facilities where they are mostly needed in less favored communities. As a private investor, a major operator, what is your opinion of this criticism?
Hello, Daniel, Alberto, thanks for the invitation. Are you listening to me? Can you hear? Good?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Hello, Fernando, Juan Carlos, Guilherme. It's a pleasure for me to be here. Veirano is one of the most big law firms in Brazil, and it's a pleasure to be here. And I think it's important to say that the investments in sanitation in the 70s, just like you said, Daniel, was something around 0.36 of GDP, and nowadays we are investing something around 0.16. So the investment nowadays is much lower than the investment 15 years ago. So 15 years ago was very important for our country, for our sanitation in Brazil. And to answer your question, I think it's important to say that Aegea, it is a private operator, and we have something around 47 cities around Brazil in 12 states. And it's important to say that 53% of these cities are less than 50,000 inhabitants, which means that we operate very small cities. I would like to have an example in Mato Grosso, which is a state here in Brazil. Mato Grosso we have an operation there with 3,000 people, inhabitants, 3,000 inhabitants. I mean, it's a small neighbor, it's more block in a small neighbor. It's just a few people, and we can operate. It's still profitable. It's important to say that it's still profitable. And we have another case, very, very important case in our company in Rondônia, which is a poor state in north of the country. We have a concession there in a city called Buritis. It's important to say that it's a very, very poor city that tries to develop their sanitation in the last 10 years. And the numbers there are very impressive because the Human Development Index was something around 0.61. For instance, in Brazil, we have a Human Development Index something around 0.76. I mean, it's a very, very poor city in Brazil, which is, we are operating there a concession for water and sewage concession, and it's still profitable as well. So we solved the problem there, and we have profit with the operation still. And important to say that the new regulatory framework will allow the group of municipalities to stay together in order to have several municipalities together with common and regional interest. I mean, they can go for a tender, just like you said, together. This is something that I think we'll take these poor areas together with the rich areas and go for a tender for a licitation to solve the problems of sanitation. This is something important for the sector and important for our company too.
Thank you very much, Asti. I hear from you. It's very interesting to hear from you that that private companies are interested in operating smaller facilities, networks, and communities, and that although we are very much worried about scale, that this probably we will be able in 10 to 20 years see that this criticism is not fair, right? So Juan Carlos, now a question to you regarding the division of the market share between public or state-owned companies and private companies, right? So there's a lot of doubt here in Brazil, and of course that foreign investors sometimes are a bit worried about how they will be seen in a country where 94% of the facilities are operated by state-owned companies. How much accepted that is? Does it make sense? How should the market be divided between public and state-owned and private companies? How does it look like in Europe? Would we be able in Brazil to reach a 40%, a 50%? How do you see that?
Thank you, Daniel, and the rest of the attendants. And thanks to my friends of Veirano for this chance to participate in this event and offer to this important audience my humble contribution from the perspective of a European lawyer and our experience across the Atlantic. You know, my firm, Cuatro Casas, is an Iberian firm with a strong presence in Latin America, but today we'll take a focus on our European perspective. In this sense, you know, management systems vary considerably across the European countries, depending on country-specific characteristics, such as national history, legal framework, culture, and the accessibility of water resources. An overall picture of the current situation in Europe shows, as you say, that about half, 48% of the population is served by water supply systems under public management, 15% by public water companies, Germany and the Netherlands, the main cases, 20% by delegated private management systems, mostly in France and in my own country, Spain, and only 1% is served by direct and fully private management companies, which is a typical case of Great Britain. In Germany, Spain, and France, it is municipalities who have the responsibility for ensuring the services and they have the choice between running the system operations themselves or delegating it to a private utility company. In Germany, this option is available for drinking water provision only, but sanitation and sewage services are considered to be a fundamental responsibility of the city and must be carried out by public enterprises, although outsourcing is allowed for certain tasks. The figures I have show that about 36% of the German drinking water providers were privately run, and private providers accounted for 64% of the delivered water, stressing privatization mainly among the largest providers. By comparison, private water companies in France supply drinking water to 66% of total customers, and they provided sewage and wastewater services to some 53% of customers connected to comprehensive water service systems. In the case of my country, Spain, some recent studies show that market shares calculated for each phase of the full cycle, that is, wholesale supply, retail sanitization, and wholesale sanitization, show that the majority of the population is served still by public entities, between 35% for supply, 66% for treatment, followed by private companies. 33% of supply depends on private companies and 20% for treatment, as well as mixed companies with 22% for supply and 7% for treatment. Municipal services have also a strong participation with 10% for supply and 6% for treatment. Concerning private management, two important groups operate in Spain, Akbar and FCC. Both are multinationals with a significant international expansion. In fact, if the market shares of the companies that are owned by the Suez Group are considered together, these groups has the highest share in retail supply, retail sanitation, and wholesale sanitation. Key factors for explaining which is the selecting mechanisms of governance include, of course, political ideology. We need to recognize that fact. With political groups in power with an ideology more favorable to a state or private operation, more likely to switch the water system to the type of organization they believe is superior. That's a fact. But apart from that, the selection of the mechanism of governance depends on the extent of asset specificity and the risk surrounding transaction, such as the risk of expropriation. I think it's worth remarking this particular risk. A more specific asset is one that is harder to, it's more harder to be used for alternative uses. And in the water industry, the asset of specificity will generally be high due to the difficulty of moving fixed assets. Higher asset specificity make public operation more likely than concessions. So these factors are significant in explaining the extent to which public or private operations are chosen, but all the factors that influence is the risk affecting the economic recovery of cost and investments. Private involvement in investment requires protection against some risks, such as those related to expropriation. When expropriation is more likely, due to the regulatory structure that allows political intervention, or one that may encourage pricing below long-term cost, investments will be clearly reduced from the private side. On top of that, local authorities with high financial constraints are associated with private operation. Public financing of investments is generally cheaper than private financing, that is true. But this benefit needs to be weighed against the risk that there will be restrictions on the quantity of the investments available from public funds. Local, regional, national governments with constrained budgets may be less able to make necessary investments, implying public ownership. So it may lead to underinvestment. In these cases, fiscal problems in a municipality would clearly be expected to increase the likelihood of changing to private operation. Definitely, local authorities with limited budgets are more likely to outsource the service. That is the European, and particularly the Spanish experience I'd like to share with you. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. What you said is very interesting because it brings us to the next question. As far as I understood from you, on the one hand, comparing the situation between Europe and Brazil, we have a very strict and difficult fiscal situation, which would make probably public investment less favorable, or an environment that is less prone to public investment. Whereas we need legal certainty, and we need well-structured projects for private investment to come in and fill this gap, right? So this is where the BNDES comes in, and this is the work the BNDES has been doing in Brazil, structuring projects to bring private investment and fill the gap that public companies in specific places have not been able to bridge. So it is very interesting. I don't know if we have managed to have Guilherme back. It seems that he had
well, I think
connection problems.
Yeah, he's having connection problems actually. So I think we should probably move to the next item.
Now my connection.
Okay.
Yeah, now my connection seems better.
Yeah, it seems much better. Thank you very much, Guilherme. I'm very happy to see you back again and being able to listen to you. That's great. We were just following Juan Carlos' presentation, and he explained to us in a much more detailed manner as I'm doing right now. But he told us a little bit of the European experience, and I would take as a summary that public investment would normally not make sense, or at least public investment normally does not take place where fiscal restrictions arise. So, and of course that when public investment, when no fiscal restrictions are in place, probably it could make sense for governments to make investments in sanitation, regardless of the return on investment, right? So they would be, of course, they would focus rather on the quality of the service only, and sustainability in the long term. When it comes to private investment, there must be legal certainty and well-structured projects. So the rate of return must be to a certain extent protected, and of course that the expropriation risk must be ousted. So I would like to hear from you what the BNDES has been doing exactly in structuring projects for private investment, would be very interesting if you could shed a light on the pipeline.
Okay, Daniel. So thank you for the invitation, and very sorry for the problem with the connections. But answering your question, we've launched a huge water program. Actually, it was in the beginning of 2017, where, considering the current situation in terms of sanitation in Brazil, we have a big lack of sewage service, right, and also problems in terms of water. So we came to the states and to the big municipalities and offering our services. And basically, our studies are made in two phases. The first phase is a kind of a diagnosis phase where you go to the field and analyze the engineering aspect of the assets, the legal aspects, and financial aspects, and then come up with a business plan considering the participation of the private sector. And at the end, what this business plan will deliver is universalization of the services in a good timeline. I mean, we actually are very conservative on defining these service level curves and so on, but there is a lot to capture in terms of operational efficiency, since there are huge problems in the operation made by some state-owned companies in Brazil, high level production losses, high level of default, and so on. So there's a huge space of improving efficiency delivered by the private sector, and then this improvement in efficiency is actually what enables the investments to be made, right? And so we launched this program in 2017, and at that time, actually, it started the discussion of our NEO bill that I know that you already discussed it here. And we also BNDES participate in that discussions. It actually was very important because it put the sanitation in the national agenda, right? And now in 2020, what we have is a pipeline being delivered. As it was mentioned before, we have an action to be placed on the end of September, which is Alagoas State project. It's a 1.5 million people and in $500 million on capex. We have a Rio de Janeiro concession program, which are 4 concessions covering almost 14 million people, and in terms of capex in dollars would be $7 billion, right? To be done in 30 years, but mainly in the first 10 years. Then we have more projects to be delivered in the near future in Amapá and Acre, which are states in the north of Brazil. And there we're going to have some concessions there as well. So basically, in the next 18 months, we expect to deliver, I would say, at least 12 projects covering more than 25 million people and $11 billion investments. And actually, this is just the project that we already did or we are currently working on it. We are after the approval of the new bill, we started conversations with other states, and for sure this number will increase, and expect to have more than 30 million people together in our projects, right? So definitely in the next 24 months there will be many projects to be delivered to the market, and for those of you that would like to invest in water and sanitation, specifically in Latin America, I think that the moment is now. We from BNDES, we have been talking with many foreign investors, for both strategic and financial ones. And basically what we have been saying is that the Brazilian market is changing. Now, we used to have small projects, some small concessions of 10,000, 50,000, 30,000 people, sometimes 100,000, or some capitals here or there in each 3 or 4 years. But now the size of the projects has grown. We're talking about millions of people, and they're talking about a pipeline. So that's what is making change. The size of the check actually increased, and as a consequence, and the fact that there's a pipeline, because everybody knows that we'll win a project, then the second, third, they may lose, but the fourth, there will be a fourth, and maybe it will win. So the fact that there's a pipeline of big projects, that's exactly what is changing. And I've just 2 hours ago, it was with a big foreign operator that is really look in Brazilian market. So we believe that it's going to change. We need to open our market. This is important. We just have 4 or 5 Brazilian players, which are good players, but we believe that it's time to open this market, and for sure this is going to happen to deliver this big pipeline to be put in place in the next years. So basically summarizing, that's what we are doing, and we expect to do more in the next years.
That's wonderful to listen to. Thank you very much, Guilherme. It is very good news when we hear that. Whereas we are discussing, and now we have just approved in Brazil a new law for sanitation. We must have a pipeline, of course. You know, it's no good to have only a new law without a proper pipeline that needs, including the needs that the new law is also trying to address, which is private investment, which is scale, which is efficiency. So it's great to hear that. It seems that Fernando probably had a problem with his connection. I don't see him here on the panel. So I think, Alberto, you could move on with the next question to Jacy, maybe.
Yeah, I think, I mean, Jacy, I mean, the question is related to, the increase of scale. I think Fernando touched on it when he was answering the first question about, the regionalization, how to tackle the scale issue. And I think, in your presentation, you made a very, very interesting remark about your project in the Rondônia area, in other areas in which, you have been able to create, say, projects that have been successful, even though being in a small area. But still, do you think that the scale issue is an important factor to attract foreign, institutional investors as a whole? How do you see the way the new law tackled it? You see it as a positive move in order really to make the sector more attractive?
Yes, actually, I think we are facing a very important moment in Brazil regarding our sector, of course. And today, as we said in the beginning, we have half of the country without sewage and collected or treated. So we are talking about something around 700 billion reais of investment. Some studies tell us more. They are telling sometimes something around 1 trillion reais, which means $200 billion. So it's a lot of money. This is a money that we have to bring from abroad, because Guilherme was saying about the projects from the BNDES, and he knows about the size of the check, the size of the money that must be invested to universalize our sanitation. So I think every project, every state, every city can bring someone to analyze, because as a private investor, we see every project, we see the design, we see the size of the check, we see the geographic position, we see everything, and we as a citizen in Brazil, we're gonna need the private sector, we're gonna need the public sector, and we're gonna need the money for abroad, for pension funds, for whatever. We're gonna need all the money we can invest in Brazil for this sector. We're gonna have space. We have a lot of gaps to invest here, and the answer is yes, definitely. We can bring some money to invest in Brazil. We can analyze each state separately. We can analyze municipalities. We can analyze states. We can analyze public companies. We can analyze everything, every type of design that we can study. We're gonna do it. So I think yes, we have to bring the scale is important, and the size of the check is important too.
I think I see one point that I found it very interesting in your remarks about your experience. How did you deal with the tariff issues in communities, in cities like the one in Rondônia and stuff like that? Because obviously you have to have a balance between the investments and the tariff and the investment return and the tariff that you can charge. And if you're talking about a city that, I mean, as you said, is a very poor cities and poor people, that's probably one of the key points, and I think probably your experience could be interesting. Just just a short remark on that. I mean, it's a little bit off the record here, but I mean, I just wanted to hear
yes.
that.
I think it's an interesting question, because the tariff is always an issue when you talk about sanitation, when you talk about concessions or PPP. But studies point out that in many cases, investments for the construction of sewage networks covered by tariffs. Normally, in particular, the tariffs are enough to cover the investment because of the efficiency. It's important to say that the private sector brings the efficiency to the operation. So we strongly believe that efficiency is the key mark, is the most important thing in this type of concessions or PPPs or whatever kind of projects that will born. And we believe the efficiency, we can use the same tariff without any raise. This is important. It depends on the case, of course, but sometimes the most part of the municipalities, most part of the states, we can do the sanitation. We can universalize without any raise in the tariff. This is an important point.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. Daniel, back to you.
Thank you, Alberto. That's a very good point indeed. When we speak about scale, we are also saying that when a foreign investor looks at the constellation of concessions in Brazil, it's different when you look at 5,000 municipalities, 5,000 concessions, potentially, let's say. Of course, that's not the current situation, but something we'd like to avoid, right? And it's different when you look at regional blocks, right? Blocks of municipalities or metropolitan regions and everything. So, Juan Carlos, that's the question to you. When the foreign investor comes to Brazil and he knows he's going to deal not with several small municipalities, but rather with a regional authority, metropolitan authority, maybe even a state authority, depends on how regulation is delegated, right? So, do you see that as a gain, or do you think that a foreign investor would see that with satisfaction that he will be able to deal with less authorities
something is a matter commonly accepted that one of the main characteristics of this industry is that it is affected by economies of scale. It's related to its condition as a natural monopoly. The industry of urban water and wastewater services has been considered not traditionally a natural monopoly, at least in terms of infrastructure, because services are provided through a fixed network with high fixed and sunk cost. The infrastructure requires very capital-intensive, specific, and long-term assets. So it has been argued that it's not economically efficient to replicate this infrastructure. At least in Europe, it seems to be quite a large amount of empirical evidence indicating that these services have an optimum scale, an ideal scale, which may be different in each country or region or area, depending on its characteristics. But there are economies of scale up to a certain level, after which these economies of scale are also observed. But in those countries which have implemented reforms in order to increase the efficiency, something Jesse was highlighting, the main reform has been to restructure the sector by increasing the geographical scale of the service. In many cases, precisely by assigning powers to supra-municipal entities, at least for some of the phases of the urban water cycle. This increase in scale seeks to exploit the economies of scale present in this sector, and thereby reduce the average cost and achieve the ideal production scale. So answering to your question, it's clear that an institutional framework enabling to reach this ideal scale is essential. When the provision of services is framed within a model of competition for the market, as it is the case with urban water services in many European countries, The provision of a smaller than ideal scale diminishes the appeal of these activities for potential private operators who will opt out of bidding on these tenders where the scale involved is inefficient. So an essential prerequisite to ensure that the service is provided on an efficient scale is a rigorous and general analysis of the scale of the urban water cycle. It is necessary to consider the need to expand the territorial scope for providing the services. In many cases, it means extending it beyond the municipal territory when the municipality is insufficient. In this matter, let me take the example of my own country, Spain, where a review of the empirical evidence on economies of scale with institutional schemes similar to our country show the potential for reducing the average cost just by increasing the scale on which a service is provided. This is an evidence in countries like France, Italy, or Germany. In Spain, though the service that make up the urban water cycle are highly segmented. The industry sources estimate that although there are more than 8,000 municipalities in Spain, the possibility of grouping them to provide water services would yield approximately 2,500 systems, with large differences in terms of scale among them. So there are coexisting urban water systems at scale that are higher, equal, and lower than the ideal scale. As a result, the solutions also vary between systems. Some cases will require contracting the scale, but in most, it will be necessary, and it's necessary to expand its scale. An analysis in international experiences shows that increasing the scale provides higher efficiency. So taking into consideration that we have some 2,500 water systems in Spain, and given the small size of Spanish municipality, everything seems to indicate that the most common problem is the insufficiency of this scale. To tackle this problem, we have the jurisdictional controversy, because municipalities are the entities that have the responsibility over urban water services, but in many cases they are delegating in supra-municipal organizations, either because the facilities are declared of regional or general interest, or because the municipalities themselves delegate voluntarily the power to supra-municipal or regional entities. This demonstrates and shows that providing services jointly to several populations, to the population of several different municipalities, is often more efficient, meaning that economies of scale are better taken advantage of. In my region, it is many often provincial councils who proposes, always with the consent of the affected municipalities, how to provide the service, whether directly by the council or by implementing shared management schemes through consortia, associations, or other kind of arrangements. And if a municipality does not give its consent, the service will have to be continued by the municipality itself. But it will not be able to take advantage from the synergies and from the economic benefits that the shared management would bring. So this is, as a final conclusion, the experience in the European countries and the Spanish experience I can share with you is that scale is important, size is important, and the best way to obtain efficiencies is by grouping and collaborating among and between different levels and territories to achieve such economies of scale.
And Daniel, if I may add just a few comments on that. Okay? No, just I totally agree with Juan, but just to let everybody know how we deal with the fact that we need to have scale. So we decided in 2017 to group municipalities, right? So that's why we are talking about millions of people together in a concession contract. But at the same time, we need to take care with respect to governance, right? So considering Sabesp, for instance, which is the biggest state-owned company in Brazil that runs São Paulo systems, they have more than 200, 300 contracts because they have contracts with all municipalities where they are working on, right? So imagine how difficult it is to deal with 200, 300 holder of the services, and not easy to deal with that. 200 mayors, 300 mayors, Copasa in Minas Gerais, which is a big company as well. They have more than 600 contracts, so it's not easy. Here in our contract, we really simplify that a lot. So there is just one concession contract, one granting power, which is the state, and one regulatory agency, which is the state regulatory agency. So at the end, the holder of the services, which are the municipalities or the metropolitan area, according to Brazilian law, they delegate the power to do the concession to the state. So at the end, the concessionary will just have to deal with the governor, right? And of course, there are some mechanisms where the municipalities, they may give their opinion or their request, but at the end, who will decide will be the state together with the concessionary and the regulatory agency. So we really simplify that a lot because from one hand, we need to have scale, but we need to have simple governance as well. So that's how we deal with that. And we believe that this will be again changing and will really help to improve investment and speed up the process because it really simplifies negotiation discussions, which are common in a 30-year of contract. Just to add this.
Daniel, sorry. Can I ask some question to Guilherme? Guilherme, do you know how much is the capex for those projects that the BNDES is studying?
Yeah.
I mean, if you get the amount together for all the states.
Yeah. Altogether, for eight states, which are more than 12 or 13 concessions, because for instance, Rio de Janeiro, there will be 4 concessions, but here we are talking about $11 billion on investments, right? So $11 billion investments. And this number will increase because we are now talking with other states and mayors, so easily this number will increase as the number of population, as the number of people that lives in our area of work. Currently, we are talking about up to 25 million people in the area of our projects, and this number will increase to 30 or 35, we believe, at least 30. So we're talking about, I don't know, 15% of the population of Brazil.
It's a lot of money.
I think what I mean, just to make a small comment on what Guilherme is saying. I think what you're saying is absolutely correct. Is the most important. Not actually, I wouldn't say change, but I would say reference of the new law in which it really makes an emphasis on the fact that the municipalities and the region will have to work together to find ways, and the state will have to create the famous sanitization areas in order to make sure that they are able to put together one sole system in order to explore the area instead of, as you said, having several other agreements. We had that before, and we were discussing with the Jaci before we began this seminar here, the situation of the Prolagos regions, in which, I mean, effectively there were 5 municipalities working through one sole concession, but this was one very isolated case, and I think the idea now, if I understood, and I think that's what the NDS is clearly studying on, and the law kind of came to re-emphasize the importance of this, the need of the people of the municipalities coming together and building up a sole system with a sole regime in order to facilitate, I mean, management of the agreement, management of the tariff, and all this stuff.
Just to add here, because there is a question in the chat in respect to Cariacica project, because I haven't talked about it. So we have the Alagoas auction to be held on the end of September, right? And Cariacica, which is a PPP, sewage PPP, is actually the only project that there is not regional, because in that area they already have several PPPs, and the Cariacica municipality was just the one that was missing, and the BNDES just help the granting power there to update the study that they already had on that time. And the auction is expected to be held on the first half of September. Okay, and so just because I saw that there is a question here. Okay.
Yeah, I think there was something missing. It's true, because it was actually I was in charge to explain a little bit how the law incentivized the creation of blocks, right? So it was not clear. There's a question here in the chat from Isabel Guimarães about how municipalities, if they are obliged or not to make part of this block, right? So it's important to emphasize what the law has done. So the new law has established that states, they have, I don't remember, Guilherme, it's 1 or 2 years to approve, to create a block by ordinary law, and municipalities, they may access this block or not. If the state doesn't do that, then the federal government may issue a decree and create this block. So why would a municipality accept or not to be a part of the block? So it's very simple. Since sanitation is a service that is held by municipalities in Brazil, the federal government cannot force them or cannot create a federal law and oblige them to be part of a block. So the federal government cannot do that, legally speaking. But what the government can do, the federal government can put a condition for municipalities to use federal monies for sanitation, because they receive both budgetary funds and they are also financed through the BNDES, Caixa, and other federal banks. So these municipalities, they have access to federal monies from the budget or from banks. So what the law says is that municipalities, they will not have access to these monies if the municipality does not enter the block, or if the municipality does not accept certain regulatory standards that the federal agency will establish. So this is very important for everyone to understand. It also requires an understanding of how the Brazilian Federation works, where there are many municipalities in Brazil that cannot afford their own operations. Many of them have even difficulties to charge the taxes they have created themselves due to the lack of public servants and everything. So municipalities in Brazil, they are very much dependent on federal funds. So once federal funds flow to municipalities to address sanitation services, these municipalities have to comply with federal law, which means that they have to adopt the standards set forth by the federal regulatory agency, and they must then be part of a block that is created according to a state ordinary law or a federal decree. It's very important to understand that this is a huge incentive a federal law is giving to municipalities in order to be part of blocks and adopt certain regulatory standards that should harmonize and or make a uniformization of regulatory standards in Brazil. Okay, that was a very important explanation I was due to make, and I forgot to do that. So then I would follow to the next question to Guilherme. Guilherme, looking at regulation right now, so we're moving to speak a little bit about regulation. I just explained how regulation would, the new law, of course, it's much more complex than that, but the new law created a new authority to the Federal Water Agency, which is to establish general standards, reference standards for sanitation services in Brazil, and to create also delegation or partnership agreements with other state or regional agencies to exchange best practice and everything. So the federal agency has become a sort of a general certifier, diffuser of best practices, and municipalities would adopt these best practices due to their interest in accessing federal monies, right? So we would expect in the near future these municipal agencies, or maybe regional metropolitan regulatory agencies, they will likely start to work together, work with the federal agency. How does the BNDES see the collaboration of the federal agency and the state and regional or municipal agencies in the future? How will that?
Okay, so just I put in this chat here. I don't know if everybody can see a link. So I don't know, Daniel, if they can see a link to our website where they can find all detailed information about our project. So water and sanitation.bnds.gov.br. So water and sanitation.bnds.gov.br. So there you find many detailed information about all projects that we are currently working on. So answering your question, I think that the new bill has some basic assumptions there, right? We are talking about some basic concepts, I would say. So transparency, competition, standardization, focus on regionalization, so scale. These are some basic concepts that are presented there, and that actually at the end what will change the market in Brazil, enable more investments, right? And our national water agency is key here actually, because you provide some of the basic standards to be followed by the subnational agency, the state agencies and the municipality agencies. I think that it will take time, right? To take time for that. We are here from BNDES. We are starting to work together with ANA, with our national agency, helping them and support them in what they want, and providing a little bit information about what we have been doing so far. But and also it's important to highlight that the standards you need to differentiate state-owned companies to concessions, where you have together in one single contract all municipalities, or you are kind of a platform grouping many what we call contratos de programa, which are the contracts signed between the municipality and the state-owned company. So there are a lot to be done in terms of standardization rules to be put in place by the ANA agency. And I think it will take time, right? A year, 2 years maybe. But so far, what we are doing here in BNDES is putting everything in the contract, right? So you not need to change when ANA launch a given procedure. So, for instance, risk matrix, obligations, how the contract will be recalibrated, tariff, that is always important, how the tariff is updated among the years. So everything is already set in the contract, providing full security to the investors, right? Why that? Basically because it will take time, as I said before. So maybe 2 years for that, and we need to do stuff. We need to start investments, and actually, I think, and it's already happening. I think that many things that we are building here and discuss with the market, we represented it will be there in the ANA procedures, right? So, but at the end, due to the money power, so the public banks here, BNDES, Caixa Econômica Federal, they are the main source of financing sanitation in Brazil, basically because you're talking about long-term credit, more than 20 years, right? And investments such as sanitation needs which is a long-term investment, needs time, so needs a long-term financing. So BNDES and Caixa can provide 20 years of credit. So it's very important to enable, from a financing point of view, at least part of the credit being provided by this public bank. So, and that there is a huge enforcement on that. You mentioned that the municipalities that decided not to be part of the blocks, the big blocks, will not receive, will not be financed by this public bank, so federal resources. And the same happens if a subnational agency doesn't follow the rules set by the national agency. So again, everything is be punched for making sure that we're going to have big blocks, regional blocks, and the regulatory subnational agency following the national procedures that we put in place in the next years.
I think, I mean, probably a little bit related to that, Guilherme, and I think I would just then make this question to Jaci, which is also interesting to hear his experience, because obviously one of the key aspects of all this this regime or all this the system is how to deal with the agencies. And I would be interested to hear the agencies or the concession entity in the case of municipalities. And so, I mean, I just wanted to hear your experience, Jaci, as to how to deal with that, because obviously the key aspect, again, is how to set the tariff, and you have to deal all the time in order to change the tariff or in order to adequate the tariff to certain circumstances. You have to deal with the agencies or directly with the municipalities. And how is the experience on that, and to what extent do you see ANA's involvement on that will represent an actual improvement in this relationship between the concessionary and
I think it's important to make a comparison between the energy sector and the sanitation sector, because if you see all the money that came to Brazil for infrastructure from abroad, is a great percentage comes from energy sector, because it's important to say that the investor outside Brazil, they are comfortable with the energy sector, with the agency, especially the ANEEL. Probably everybody knows ANEEL, which is the agency for energy sector, and the agency is pretty much respected by everyone, and the agency is a reference for every other sector that wants to bring more security, more institutional security for the investor. Okay, this is an important thing that sanitation is trying to do the same. As Guilherme said, it's a long term. It's not for tomorrow, but we take time to increase the agency, to increase ANA. And what can I say is that we have good regional agencies as well. So I'm leading the concessions and PPPs for AEGEA in São Paulo, and I can assure you that we have probably one of the most qualified agencies here, which is Ares. The name is Ares, and I know they are talking each other. They are talking to ANA. ANA is searching, is seeking for advisor to implement the standards. So they are studying a lot, and they are talking with each other to get the regulation better. But of course, we have to improve some regional agencies, but we have good agencies to implement or to help ANA to implement the regulation. So I think it's a matter of time. The time will come, probably 1, 2, 3, 5 years, but we have the same way of the energy sector in Brazil, just a matter of time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see that takes us to Juan Carlos. Juan Carlos, when we speak about a federal agency creating standards for states, regional authorities, municipalities to follow, it reminds us of the European experience of the harmonization of European law, and also applied to public services, which is a concept not accepted under European law, but is a similar concept which would apply to sanitation. So how do you see the improvement of regulation through a harmonization process?
Yeah, to be honest, I look at your Brazilian experience with admiration. You have to take into account that there is no European water policy per se, nothing really considered a European water policy as such. Rather, what we have is an environmental policy of the European Union, because these areas of jurisdiction are shared competencies between the EU and the member states, where the principle of subsidiarity applies. Despite this, it's true that European water laws are relatively abundant, but all of them have a pointed environmental character, and their main goal is to preserve water quality and to manage it sustainably as a natural resource. Though this does not mean that they do not include provisions of a rather more economic nature. Some specific directives at the European level that I have to remark are the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive and the Drinking Water Directive, which are relatively well complied with in the different European members. However, all the state members, or many of them, reflect or highlight the lack of funding as one of the main obstacles to achieve full compliance. So we have this general umbrella with the European policies and directives, what we call the Water Framework Directive, which gives guidelines and a basic principle all member states have to follow, in particular the idea of the principle of recovery of cost in water services. This is the main economic idea within the water policy in Europe that all state members have to implement. Therefore, the directive links the idea of cost recovery with the polluter pays principle, so that costs have to be recovered and all resources and environmental costs had to be charged on the water services, so that there is a balance between costs and incomes. That's a common policy in all European countries, without having a full harmonized regulation in all the different areas that seems to be in course in Brazil. The idea of cost is perhaps the main problem the European institutions are trying to face and cover, particularly for the state members to comply with the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive and the Drinking Water Directive, as well as to enhance the efficiency of water supply systems. But to give you an idea, some estimates point out to an annual average expenditure of 100 billion euros across the 28 EU member states needed to cover all these water infrastructure needs. It means that all European countries, perhaps with the exception of Germany, will need to increase its annual expenditures to reach the goals of the European directives, but also to finance the cost of operate and maintain and renew the existing assets. It is against this backdrop, this context, that collaboration among international institutions prove useful and a crucial tool. For example, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development works with the European Commission to review what future investment the European countries have as a need and what financing capacities in the EU member states are available. As a matter of fact, sustainable financing strategies seem relevant far beyond the EU member states, and also, of course, is a key point in the Brazilian policy. But in search for these areas of collaboration, the OECD has identified three ultimate sources of finance for water supply and sanitation, and they have realized that the international community is one of the main providers of these funds. In some European countries, public budgets allocated to water supply and sanitation heavily rely on EU funding. The funding is from the European Union. And this is a reality, it's a fact, but it's not sustainable. EU funds available for water supply and sanitation will decline over time. So other sources of finance, debt or equity, will have to be mobilized to cover the upfront cost of the investment and also the maintenance costs in several countries. And the problem is that the current level of public debt and the sovereign credit rating are raising concerns about the capacity to allocate more public funding to expenditures related to water supply and sanitation. It is a problem shared by other countries, not only in Europe, but also out of Europe, and I guess it's also something you are facing in Brazil too. All in all, the European institutions are emphasizing the fact that most countries will need to consider new sources of finance. Private finance, commercial debt or equity is available in all European countries to a large extent, so there is room for maneuver to attract commercial capital for creditworthy investment, but also there is a need to strengthen the transition to cost recovery through tariffs as a resource to fully finance the water services and the agents involved in the provision. Spain has been one of the top receiving entities and countries receiving funding from the EU cohesion funds, which proves that there is evidence that international support and cooperation is a key element in developing water infrastructures, but not only as a source of financing, but also as a guidance for good practices in such development. In this context of a collaborative but fragmented Europe, I cannot and do not wish to avoid and hide my admiration for a legal framework such as the new Brazilian scheme that offers a coordinated approach to some of the problems that we are all facing when we talk of the provision of water services. And I'm sure that the Brazilian experience will shortly be taken as a reference from which we all will be able to draw important lessons, not only in the Americans, but also across the Atlantic, in Europe, and in my country, Spain in particular, too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Juan Carlos. Very kind of you. I mean, we are very proud and very happy to hear your views. You know, Danielle, I mean, I think we have some few questions. You want to deal with them, Danielle, yourself, and then I make the closing remarks. And do we have time for going through the questions?
Yeah, no, I think we are off time, but we will.
Sorry, I think, I mean, you could go ahead yourself, Danielle. I mean, if you can deal with them.
Closing remarks, all right.
The questions.
So sure. Yeah, but
okay, fine. No, you know, I was understanding that we would be answering them now. Okay. Anyway, I want to thank you. I mean, all the participants here, Jaci, Juan Carlos, Guilherme, and especially Daniel for the hard work done in organizing all this. Unfortunately, Fernando is not here anymore, but I thank him anyway. It's been very interesting to hear all the various views with respect to these very important sectors. We know that we have. I think we have gone a long way after years in discussing this new sanitation law, and I think we have done a good job. There is a long way, as pointed out by both Guilherme and Jaci, in implementing what we expect to achieve with that law. I think there is going to be a lot of discussion between the various levels of the Brazilian Federation. There's going to be this political discussion about how to implement. And also, I mean, there's going to be the need of understanding what this new regulatory system means. And I think here it comes the importance of having people like Guilherme at the BNDES and the group who are doing a tremendous job in putting together, I mean, the set of explanation that's going to be announced and divulged within the market for understanding, and people like Jaci as well, with his knowledge and his experience with the agencies and the market in Brazil. Also, I mean, making it clear that this is not that terrible as some people point out. I mean, so often we hear from people that are considering to invest in this sector, I know the tariff system is a nightmare. We can never deal with the municipalities or the agents. It's too complicated. And I think maybe this is a little bit of a result of a bad understanding of the system. I'm sure that it's not simple, but if dealt with seriousness and in a way that people have to deal with the public services, the public interest as a whole, I think we can achieve our objectives. Obviously, we're far from being there, but we're very hopeful and optimistic that we can get there. So this is, I mean, essentially what I wanted to say, and thank also for the audience for the patience to take the time to hear us. And we are at the disposal of you all in answering the questions and providing whatever information you may need. Thank you very much, and also thanks for the organizing team of Veirano that has done a great job in organizing all that. And Juan Carlos, also for you, thanks very much for taking the time to explain and to provide us your views about, about the European system, the Spanish systems, and also for making an effort to understand a little bit our system in order to draw the comparison, very interesting comparison you made.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Daniel, thank you, Alberto. Thank you, Juan. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.